Okay, so the next function you need to write is one that returns multiple values. And although we say we write a function that returns multiple values, and that's the standard way of saying it, what we really mean actually is that it's just a function that returns a tuple, and then we use tuple unpacking to sort of get this very nice syntax where it looks like it's returning two values separated by a comma. But I'll explain more how that works when I do the solution. So let's just check what it needs to do. So we're given a list and a threshold value, and then the function should return the list of all the elements that are bigger than the threshold, as well as the minimum value of the list. So that's basically what it should do. Okay, let's try to solve that by finding a function here, and then I'm just going to print out this result. And I'll just write a dummy line here so I can insert a breakpoint, then we'll try to experiment with the function. Okay, so I go to this, go here, and I start the debugger. And now we can see that the program has started to execute, and then it stops as soon as it hit the breakpoint. So it basically reads the file, it doesn't run the function, it just notices there's a function defined here. Then it runs this line of code, and that line of code will call our function, and then it will stop at the breakpoint. And therefore we can go to the debug console and we can print out what state the various values has. So this first input argument to the function will be assigned to this list, and the second input argument will be given a value of 2, because that was how we called the function. And also verify this like as so. Okay, so in order to implement this function, I guess I will define an empty list, and then I will loop over the values. And then what I want to do is that I want to see if this value of x is smaller than the threshold, and I guess it's smaller than or equal. Then I append x to the list like this. And that should, now I just want to confirm that I did this correctly, and I do that by running this code. And I can do that in two ways. I can select the code, and then I can copy paste it here, and that will run it. Now I can see that ls has been updated to this value. That looks correct. Yeah, that looks correct. And another way is to use a shortcut, namely Shift-Alt-E, which is also going to run the code. Okay, so that seems to solve the first part of the problem fairly well. And now we need to solve the second part of the problem. We need to get the minimum value of the list, and we can just do that by using the min function. So if we use the min function on a list, we can see that that finds the minimum value. And that seems reasonable because minus 0.5 is in fact the minimum value. Then what I can do is that I can define a tuple called result as ls and minval, and now my function is going to return that tuple. So let's try to do a little experiment. Let's call the tuple for t, and then look at what happens if I insert a breakpoint here and then basically run the file until this point. So I'm just going to stop the debugger, and then I'm going to restart it in the debugger. And the reason why I restarted is because I changed the file, and then it needs to be restarted in order to evaluate the file with my changes. So now that I restart the file, it still stops the debugger here as before. That's fine, but that's not really what I want to stop. I want to continue until the next breakpoint, and now it hits the next breakpoint. Now if I go to the debug console and examine what t is, you see that t is a tuple with these two values that I computed before. And then what I can actually do is I can use tuple unpacking that you saw in the lecture. That looks like this. And all that does is that it says, okay, here I have A and B, and these should be assigned to the corresponding values in that tuple. So A will be assigned to this value, and B will be assigned to this value. And if I run this line, so I just use Shift-Alt-E, we can see that A and B have been assigned correctly. And I can, of course, take this line, simplify it a little, get rid of this T value, and that line will function as if this function returns two values. That's what it looks like. But in fact, we know it just returns a tuple. And I can also, if I want, I can also simplify this a bit, because here I define a variable and then I only use it here. I could do this instead, get rid of this value, and I can even simplify it further by getting rid of the parentheses, because as you also saw in the lectures, whether I have parentheses here or not, it will still define a tuple. That's just a convention that Python follows. So this is an alternative way of solving the problem. Okay, let me comment on all of this out, stop the debug, and just check that the tests work. They don't. That was embarrassing. So let's see why it failed. So in this case, let's see what it was called with. So it was called with this value, and it should return this. Oh, wait a second. Okay, so the way you read this output is that this is the code that was called. The test called the code like this, with this long list and this threshold value, and then it expected this output. But what it tells me is that your code, like my code, in fact produced this output here. So my input is first, and that's wrong. And I can see that that's because I thresholded it wrong. I should not include the values that are less than the threshold, but the values that are greater than the threshold. So I made a mistake. I simply misread the assignment because I was rushing a bit. So, being appropriately punished for that, let me just try to rerun the test, and I still get an error. This is getting increasingly embarrassing. So, let's see what the problem is. It should be strictly greater and not just greater. So I can see that because my code returned this result and it should be this result. So again, punished by not reading the problem correctly. Greater than threshold. Okay, and let's see. Now it works. So that was a bit embarrassing, but I guess I just need to start reading these problems a little bit better.